This from Rob on email, and it's not a bad one. How do Atalanta consistently punch so far above their weight every year despite the huge player turnover?
I feel like we've fallen straight off the back of the main show, really. And Dortmund, Leverkusen, keep your house clean and tidy, I think is the message from this week's OTC shows, because that's what Atalanta have managed to do very well. And what Rob points out there about the huge player turnover is particularly a phenomenon of this summer. They don't normally have this level of turnover. And that's the interesting thing to me, the fact that the start of this season should not have gone nearly as well as it has for Atalanta, because they have the big injuries to Scalvini, to Scamacca, the coke miners thing that just won't go away, and they have to replace him, and they have to wait until he goes to spend the money. And so a little bit like Leipzig last summer, who I guess in a way, not entirely same model, but similar sort of level of club in terms of aspirations and trading and what they can realistically expect in the domestic league. I think the way they've ridden that out, they had a slightly difficult first game or two to the season, and now they've just smashed it for the last dozen games. They've looked absolutely brilliant. And I think the way they've recruited, it looked quite risk heavy. I think a lot of people thought, how come you're playing that much for Matteo Retegui? It's a signing that's really worked out, obviously. I think the existing players that are there are really strong, but of course the common denominator is Gasperini. And Gianpiero Gasperini has been allowed a lot of power at Atalanta for a long time for a reason. He's the perfect coach of that club. He isn't really just the coach. He's more like an old style manager in terms of the sort of influence he exercises. He's more of a Sir Alex Ferguson or Sir Arsene Wenger than any really of his Serie A counterparts. Now, people ask, should he be getting a job at a bigger club? Would he want it? Would he want it? Because
grass isn't always greener. Right?
Yeah, and he's never getting that sort of influence at a bigger club. But of course, I think what going back to the specifics of Rob's question, even though the turnover has been bigger this summer, he's not been afraid to lose big, important players in the past. Now, you think when he had that row with Papu Gomez, who was a massively important player for them, which turned really bad, the club backed him when other clubs might not have. And they proved right. Papu Gomez went on and won a Europa League at Sevilla, but, if you're in the hairdressers for long enough, you're going to get a haircut. I think that doesn't really speak about his career as a whole from that point. But when he's had to make difficult decisions, he's done that. And that's not just a this summer thing or last summer thing. It's a long-term thing.
Yeah. And look, I honestly think that simplest answer to this question is Gasperini. That is the answer to this question. I think that's the fact that, the continuity that he provides, the environment that he's cultivated there. It doesn't matter who comes in or comes out. Identified by the data, by the recruitment, which is obviously excellent anyway. So they know what type of player they want. So there might be some naysayers on the outside saying, why did they pay that much money for Retegui? Atalanta were confident in that he was the right man for them, and they'll have it in place for, say, when Lookman eventually gets sold for 80 million to a Premier League club who will want to pay that. They'll have somebody in mind for that as well, and that's just how they operate, and they've got it nicely like that. And I think a lot of other clubs who have a high turnover, by the way, do struggle to sometimes find that continuity because they also end up changing coaches. They change, whether they get sacked, whether they get poached by elsewhere, whereas Gasperini very much just runs the show from top to bottom.
And when Rob asks how are they punching so far above their weight, is he referring to in Serie A or in the Champions League?
It's everywhere now. Yeah. In every single facet, they probably shouldn't be as high as they are in Serie A continuously each year. When you look at all the money spent around them in other clubs, and then in the Champions League, wow, absolutely not. They're a complete outlier there. How impressive they've done that in Europe as well, and especially last year getting that trophy.
Yeah, beat Young Boys 6-1 away from home on Tuesday night. I suppose that was laying down the gauntlet in terms of the Champions League. They're second in Serie A, point behind Napoli. Can they do better than that in Serie A, do you think, punching above their weight?
I'd be surprised, but it feels like if there was a season they were going to do it, it would be this. They're very, very convincing so far.
This from Aaron on Blue Sky. What are your thoughts on the legacy of Robert Lewandowski? What legacy will he leave behind when he retires? And despite now scoring a century of European goals, I still feel like he's not regarded as one of the all-time greats. Has he been a victim of his era?
Oh, that's a really interesting one, I think. I think he's lauded. I think he's praised. I think he gets a lot of acclaim. I think he's generally recognised as, of the modern era, where one of the best strikers. For many people, he's the best. I know there's always a lot of debate whether him or Karim Benzema has been the best number 9 of this era. And no, I think he gets enough acclaim. I think it is. I think perhaps if there's one thing that goes against him, maybe it's his nationality. Maybe he was a more glamorous nationality of a leading European nation, then maybe he'll get more credit and more praise. But I mean, his record is very, very difficult to go against. Elite top scorer in Germany. And he's done it at as he's got older. He's walked into La Liga and he's dominated there and proved very strong there.
I think people don't really appreciate what a massively multifaceted player he is, and I think part of that is to do with his career choices. Like, if he'd have played for a decade for Dortmund, I think people would realise exactly how good he is. And really, what tells you how good he is the incredible difficulty Dortmund had in replacing him. You think that the summer that he went to Bayern, they tried to replace him. They realised they couldn't replace him with one striker because he's a hold-up man, target man, goal scorer, someone who can drop and link play, someone who actually relishes beating up defenders. He's all of those, and that's something that's not really recognised about him. He's all of those things. But of course, something different is demanded of him at Bayern to be that penalty box player all the time. So we don't see so much of that, even though he's capable of being that. Now, I wonder if we're having this, as Aaron says, this sort of, I guess, re-estimation of his body of work because he's having this revival this season at Barcelona. At Barcelona, it's always felt a bit strange because he came into not a great team at not a great time when clearly they had some financial issues that he wasn't the solution to, and he probably wasn't the wisest signing for them in that sense as they sought to get things right on the balance sheet. But he's been a brilliant leader for them this season. There's clearly the click with Hansi Flick, as we've said before. He's got himself into unbelievable physical condition. And for someone who's normally very fit, for him at 36 to go, okay, you thought I was fit before? Look at this. Check this out. And whatever he's done pre-season, it's incredible.
La Liga suits his game at this stage of his career as well. We've seen a lot of older players go to La Liga and thrive, and I think the physical demands aren't quite as high as they say are definitely not the Premier League or even the Bundesliga. So I think it's helping them kind of that. But I've got one thing just to ask you.
Go on.
You have to pick a number 9 of this era. Benzema or Lewandowski, who are you taking?
Oh, I'm Team Benzema, totally. I can't not. Really,
I would go for Benzema as well.
I think I'm going for Benzema. So maybe
showing our bias, though. I wonder if there is a bias going on here.
If there's a bias towards Magic, then yeah, definitely. Like
Okay.
Lewandowski is incredible, but no other centre forward has been able to do exactly what Benzema does. Not even his idol Ronaldo, actually.
So maybe the question is right. Maybe he is underrated. We've all just underrated him.
You can't.
There you go. He is a victim of his era.
You cannot underrate somebody who is third on the list of Champions League goal scorers. It's obviously behind Ronaldo and Messi. How far behind Ronaldo is he, David?
30 goals.
I would have guessed 30, 35,
40.
Okay.
Behind Ronaldo.
Okay. All right.
Messi's got 129, so he's got 28 to catch
Of course,
up
the real record of the week is Angel Di Maria going past Messi for second most assists in Champions League history. He's only one behind Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, finally, we've found someone who's grateful for the extra 2 games in the group phase in the Champions League.
And finally, you've managed to outdo me. Finally, you tried, but well done you on that one. I had to look with a vacant stare. But nevertheless, there's another question from Matt on Blue Sky. Do FC Utrecht have any chance in challenging PSV at the top of the Eredivisie? And who have been their standout players so far in the league after winning 10 of their first 12 matches? Looking forward to them clashing at the weekend, by the way.
Yeah, well, as Matt says, we're going to find out pretty quickly how real they are, because they host PSV at the weekend and then they've got Ajax after that. And Ajax are enormously improved under Francesco Farioli. So whatever happens next, I think we have to celebrate what Utrecht have been so far this season, which is just amazing. I mean, you can say there's something contextual to it. I think the fact that AZ have dropped off a little bit post Pascal Janssen is definitely part of it. But having said that, you look at their record going into this weekend, 12 games, 10 wins, a draw and a defeat. And the defeat being to Feyenoord, which obviously begs the question of how they'll do against PSV and Ajax. But nevertheless, whatever happens next, it's an incredible record to start the season with. I think the man behind it is really the coach, Ron Jans. I think he's done a great job. The very experienced coach, he's 66, 67 now, sort of in the Gasperini zone. An underrated coach for a really long time, maybe partly due to the fact that he went to MLS and partly due to the fact that he left in quite a controversial fashion from Cincinnati. But he's someone who's punched above his weight before. If you look at him winning the cup with Twente, getting them back into Europe after their complete financial collapse, he was one of the key figures in building them up again before he went to MLS. And I think you look at the fact that Eredivisie sides do tend to be younger than some of the top tier leagues, squads in Europe. But I think the experience that he has in there is very, very important. You look at Jens Toornstra, look at Nick Verkeever. I think that's super important. The standout player for me so far, though, is Paxton Aronson.
That's exactly what I was going to go for.
He's just been tarred, David, with the brush of being Brendan's little brother. And I think there was definitely a suspicion from some people in Germany that when Eintracht Frankfurt signed him, it was for maybe not entirely football reasons.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But everything that he's done, and he had a good season on loan in the Eredivisie this season, it's been even better this season. I think Paxton can be a better player than Brendan.
I think so, absolutely. I think he's technically superior for a start. I think I think his brother's game's largely based on fitness levels, pressing. Whereas I think Paxton, we've seen a really highly technically gifted player, and he's very because I think this team's largely defensive. I think it's a very defensive side overall. But when it
makes that bit of craft all the more important, doesn't it?
Exactly. So when you've got that little spark, that bit of ingenuity in attack that Aronson provides, then all the more for better. And there's going to be a lot of eyes on him in the summer. I think people's probably going to say what Eintracht Frankfurt want to do with him moving forward, because there's going to be a lot of interest.
Well, I think the opportunity really for him, I think there's a great chance for him in the Bundesliga next season, because you look at Eintracht Frankfurt, Hugo Larsson might go, Omar Mamouche will definitely go. They love a big sale, and they're so good under Markus Krösche at developing and selling players. So I think Paxton Aronson ends up back in the Bundesliga next season. The season after next, so that's 25, 26, 26, 27. God, we really are going into the future. He has an absolutely amazing season, and then 27, they sell him for a fortune. There's no need to keep listening. You know what's happening in football till 2027.
Will somebody take that crystal ball off him, please? This question from Peter on Instagram. After their 5-0 thrashing at the hands of Bayer Leverkusen, what's going wrong at Red Bull Salzburg? They've looked miles off the pace all season. So is Pep Ljinders' job under threat?
It shouldn't be, because obviously he's only just arrived. They look like they're at the beginning of a new long-term project with Ljinders at the helm. Of course, he's mainly recognised as the assistant to Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. I don't think it's escaped anyone's notice that now Klopp is going to be head of football at Red Bull. He and Ljinders will kind of reconnect, and maybe you can give him a little bit of support. I think you look at where they are, not just the way that they've started in the Champions League, because I think you have to be realistic about what they can actually achieve in there. The main problem is the Austrian Bundesliga. I mean, they're in, 6th position at the moment? They're 14, 15 points off top already. That's nowhere near acceptable. Do you think, that the reason that Ljinders is in charge, and this is part of the problem, of course, what he's been left with, is because they didn't win the league last season for the first time in a decade. It was a double for Sturm Graz, and Sturm Graz, of course, have just lost their coach, Christian Ilzer, to Hoffenheim, which will maybe change the balance of the Austrian Bundesliga again. But it looks super hard for Salzburg to win the league this season. But I think you have to be realistic, and you look at the players. We talk about the players they've managed to produce and the players they've managed to develop. And so obviously you think of Haaland, Szoboszlai, you're going all the way back to Mane, Omar Soulé, who didn't quite do it at Lyon and then really developed there. But the problem is the players they've developed have gone. The quality that they've lost over the last couple of years, there's a limit to that model, I think.
I was going to say, there's a lot of pressure on a model, even though it has been immensely successful at all levels for Red Bull, with all their different teams. There's an immense pressure on to keep producing all the time as well. And we just answered the question.
Producing and winning.
Yeah. Exactly. And look, we've just answered a question about Atalanta as well, and about, we think that Gasperini and the continuity there is the key to everything being held together there. You look at Salzburg and you look at Leipzig and you look at the teams, they've had a lot of changes in recent years as well, outside the norm of that conveyor belt, of that structure what they had. There's been more coaching changes than I think they perhaps expected, and also not even just coaching changes, but more coaching changes that haven't worked out as well. Whether this is another one with Ljinders, I'm not too sure. I think it's far too early to judge that. And with it being a club part of the Red Bull model, he will likely get a lot more time. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think there might be some understanding on the part of the whole model and the whole structure that maybe this team, this crop, what they've got right now, isn't as good as the other ones. So they shouldn't have the expectations of those teams.
The model's slightly changing, of course, because they're having to pay for talent as well. You look at the Bobby Clark deal, for example, who came in from Liverpool, who cost quite a lot of money. That's not really an area that Salzburg have been in before. It's an area that RB Leipzig have been sort of drawn into. It's a bit like Brighton, really, isn't it? Ultimately, no one wants to be that team anymore. It's a challenge for Brighton that sells them a player that they're going to sell for 4 times the fee,
of course,
like a year or year and a half down the line. So you end up paying a lot of money for guys who are not the finished article.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like their usual remit, like you said. It's like they've got incredible links and scouting networks in Africa. So you'd associate with them picking players out from Africa, from different academies and different schools that they have tie-ups with there, and players developing like that. But right now, again, it's going to be interesting to see in the next 1-2 years who does come through from that kind of crop.
I mean, is it just a question of the market changing? Because the problem is about being cutting edge. It's a bit like when Arsene Wenger turned up at Arsenal. You're cutting edge for a bit, but eventually people catch up.
Yeah.
People copy your model.
Yeah.
If you look at how Bayern were restructuring upstairs, one of the things that they were criticised for when they got Christoph Freund in and Max Eberl in, it's like, okay, shouldn't we be doing a new Bayern philosophy, not a new Red Bull philosophy? But it shows how influential Red Bull have been. And the fact that they've been able to attract Jurgen Klopp really tells you a lot about the model and how closely people are studying it, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's a problem we've discussed a lot as well, because these kind of mid-level clubs, I'd say on the probably tier 2, tier 3 clubs in Europe. So I'm going to say your Benficas.
Yeah,
they have always prided themselves on going into a South American market or a European market of a tier lower than them, going in for a player for a low price, getting him before everybody else becomes aware of him, then selling them for a huge amount of money to a Premier League club who wants to pay 67 million. I think your Benficas and your Leipzig, Salzburg are now starting to find more competition at the level that they were operating at in the market.
Yeah.
So there's more scouts there. There's more clubs now privy to what's going on in that particular area for that player. So say that South American game that is happening, that South American youth tournament. Or hey, 10 years ago there was maybe 4 or 5 scouts there. There was only 4 or 5 clubs there who were actually operating. Now, oh wow, there's 50, there's 60. Everybody wants a piece of this action. Oh, Brighton weren't here 10 years ago. Brighton are here now. Oh, they've sent about 3 scouts just to watch this tournament. So if things change and evolve like that, there's a lot more competition.
This question from Vincenzo on Instagram. With Tammy Abraham getting a goal and an assist in the Champions League against Slovan Bratislava, could this be the match to kickstart his Milan career?
I really hope so, Vincenzo. I really, really hope so. Tammy Abraham's a player I like a lot, but since starting really well at Roma, he's had a rough couple of years.
Injury-wise, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
Partly.
even that is part of it. But even before that, he had a difficult second season. Then there was the ACL, which kind of derailed his plans and Roma's plans, because Roma had planned to shift him. Not the summer just gone, but last summer 23, and then they weren't able to. He came back in. They weren't really all in on him. He found it hard to get up to pace with the team, and he's just needed a new, fresh start. Now, I guess you look at the reason that he came in for that Slovan Bratislava game. I don't think scoring and getting an assist against Slovan Bratislava is necessarily a calling card to say I'm back, because they are clearly the worst side in the Champions League. But having said that, as Vincenzo says, as being a platform for doing something and augmenting his confidence, it really could be something. Now, but with the injuries they've got up top at the moment, that is the reason that he started. And it's the best possible way of starting to take that opportunity. Because what he needs more than anything is a run of games. And that is so hard to get at one of the best clubs in modern football when results are paramount. But of course, the fact is that there is that opportunity for him because of the way the treatment room looks at the moment. And of course, the fact that Milan have had their worst start domestically in quite a few years. So I think it's 4 or 5 years, their lowest points total at this point in the season. So if ever there was an opportunity for Tammy Abraham to have a go, this is it. And of course, he's surrounded by some mates from Chelsea, which I'm sure is enormously important for him and will make him feel at home. But also, I think, David, you feel the sense that he feels the historical resonance of the jersey, and he's really proud to be there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And look, he's got experience of it as well. I mean, I know Roma was a difficult time for him with the injury and what have you, but look, he understands what it means to be at these clubs and the status that they have. And even though maybe as a player he hasn't progressed in terms of being a regular or anything like that, but I think if you were to ask him, I'd probably say he's progressed as a person, and in terms of the way he's matured. I know he was very glowing. He was asked about Mourinho recently as well, and said, "Oh, but you must regret that time under him." And he's like, "No, I don't regret it at all. He improved me as a player. He improved me as a person. I learned a lot." And you do, even though you're not playing, sometimes you do still manage to learn a lot. You become aware of things going on around you, and you start to reassess things. But Andy's absolutely right. Right now, it's now time for games and a regular run in the team, and it'll be interesting to see Morata's injury and how long that continues for, and how much of an opportunity Tammy does have.
Yeah, that's it from us. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC. If you would like to ask a question, you can contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, and at David Jacka, or at OTC Pod. And you can email us, otc@footballramble.com.